Join me today on Walk with History, all about New Orleans from Louisiana. Hi, Jenn at Walk with History, historian and veteran, and I'm here today in Jackson Square in New Orleans, Louisiana. Jackson Square, named for Andrew Jackson, our 7th president, really well known here for fighting the Battle of New Orleans in 1815, the last battle of the War of 1812. Technically after the War of 1812 was over, but he was successful in that battle, made his name, and probably really helped contributed to him becoming the 7th president. So the statue here is in dedication of him for that. But we're here in the heart of New Orleans. Jackson Square is known for all of its artists around the outskirts of this square. It's about the size of one city block. If you're a fan of movies, Interview with a Vampire has some locations here, so does The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. But behind it is the St. Louis Cathedral, named for the King of France. And New Orleans has influence from both sides, Spanish and French. So we'll talk more about that as we visit some well-known locations around here in Jackson Square. Every artist out here has to be registered to share their art, and it's their personal art if they're selling it here as well. So it's a great place to get some cool stuff. New Orleans is known for a couple things, and one of them is jazz. So why is this considered the birthplace of jazz? It's because the African American musical traditions mixed with others, and gradually jazz emerged from a blend of ragtime, marches, blues, and other kinds of music. But they say that jazz grew from the African American slaves. They were prevented from maintaining their native musical traditions and felt they needed to substitute with something homegrown. And the most likely explanation is that some New Orleans cats, think Louis Armstrong, took music they heard at home, in church, and in barrooms, and blended it together for a new sound. And that is why jazz is supposed to have originated here in New Orleans, Louisiana. One of the more popular places to go here, open 24 hours, is Café Du Monde, and everyone should probably visit here if you're visiting New Orleans. They have beignets, which are French pastries, and coffee. It's right here off the corner of Jackson Square, so it makes it very easy to visit. Why is it called the Big Easy? That name originated in the 1960s. Compared to other cities like New York, it was more of a laid-back lifestyle here. And so it got the nickname, the Big Easy. So New Orleans was founded in 1817 as a French colony, and because it's a French colony, you're going to see so much French influence here in New Orleans, including something like this, where street names are on the building walls, just like they are in Paris. Another thing about Louisiana is all the counties are called parishes. They're not counties. That comes from the Catholic influence of the French and the Spanish, who will be the next country to take over the influence of this area. It'll go back to the French and eventually to the United States of America. Here in New Orleans, it's very much influenced by French and Spanish architecture. There's two names for the types of overlooks here. If it has no supporting beams, it's called a balcony. If it has poles that come down to support it onto the street, it's called a gallery. And that's where you'll see people standing for Mardi Gras, throwing out beads. When the parades come down the street, they're either on a balcony or a gallery, depending on if there's supporting beams coming down to the river. architectural feature here in New Orleans is what they call the shotgun house. And the shotgun house is a house that basically, from the door to the back of the house, if you fired a gun, the bullet would go through every room in the house. So the rooms just build onto each other across the entire house. Sometimes it's a second story, most times they're not, but that shotgun house is a very unique architectural feature to the homes here in New Orleans. So historical claims to New Orleans, of course it's the French, 1718 to 1762. Then the Spanish Empire will take over the area from 1762 to 1801. And then for a very short period, it goes back to the first French Empire, Napoleon, from 1801 to 1803. And then it is sold in the Louisiana Purchase to our third president of the United States, Thomas Jefferson, in 1803. One of the most historic places you can come here in New Orleans is the Cabildo. It's right off of Jackson Square. So many things happen in this building, including they received the Louisiana Purchase documents here in 1803. William McKinley gives a speech to the crowd from this balcony in 1901, and they hold Napoleon's death mask here from 1821. One of the most recognizable landmarks on Jackson Square and in New Orleans in general is St. Louis Cathedral. Now, the cathedral originally was built and burned in the Great Fire of 1788. The cathedral you see today was dedicated in 1850. Old marker for Homer Plessy. This is the man who brought upon that court case, Plessy versus Ferguson, and segregation from Louisiana. That's where that separate but equal comes from when the Supreme Court decides on this case. Now, this is his original tombstone when he's buried here in New Orleans, and he's in St. Louis Cemetery number 1. Very interesting thing about the cemeteries here in New Orleans, if you ever get a chance to do those tours there, everyone is buried above ground in New Orleans because it's so close to sea level, you can't dig into the ground and bury people where they float back up. So everyone's buried above ground in these tombs, and they're entombed for a year and a day. And basically, they're really huge concrete ovens. And in a year and a day, they're opened back up and your bones are taken back out because in that amount of time, that's all that's left of you. Your bones are taken back out and celebrated. It's where you get those kind of funeral parties, and then your bones are put back into your tomb. And your tomb can be reused by all these members of your family. And so you might see different names of family members on one tomb, since that's the tomb that holds all those bones. Very interesting history about the burial rituals here in New Orleans, Louisiana. It's so neat to be able to walk with history here in New Orleans and stand where Andrew Jackson was and where the Louisiana Purchase papers were ratified, and to see where President McKinley spoke to the people in 1901. There's just so much history here in New Orleans. So many different countries have ruled this area. There's so much influence everywhere you go. And it's still celebrated today, as you can see, just the fun and the magic of this city. If you ever get a chance to make it out here, it's definitely worth the visit. On to my next Walk with History.